today we have a great speaker. The event is about interviewing, mastering interview skills. So before I think perhaps I would introduce Eddie Maguire, the director from Change Wave, is the speaker today. So Eddie, I have known Eddie for a number of years. In fact, he's one of our fellow committee members who has been organizing lots of events like this. And he is also spoke at some of the events with us. So Eddie is an executive coach. He's currently the director of Change Wave. And since joining Change Wave, Eddie has focusing on human dimensions of change and his skills in giving leaders the knowledge and tools to make change successfully. So prior to Change Wave, Eddie had multiple careers in different technology sectors. In the IT world, he was an account director with a global software vendor and later program director for IT business portfolio in major corporations. So Eddie presents on interview techniques and other topics to executive job clubs in Thames Valley. He blends hard science such as neuroscience and positive psychology with more empirical techniques such as NLP and direct experience to do this. So we will know hopefully much more about these things in the next few hours. So without further ado, please welcome Eddie Maguire. Eddie, over to you.
Good evening, everybody. So very welcome. This was originally scheduled to be a face-to-face meeting, and as Abaya said, we had anticipated we'd run at about 30 people in the room, but we've had to move to Zoom with the current pandemic and the ramifications of that. So we've got, on my other screen, I can see the tiles for all of you great people there. If you're comfortable, it would be great if you turn on your screen, because for me, it then feels like I'm actually talking to people rather than just a blank wall. So it just helps make the presentation a little bit. Thank you, Chandra. Thank you all. Wonderful, Tanya. That's great. It just makes it feel like there's somebody at the other end. So thank you very much. So what I'm going to do is we're going to talk about succeeding at interviews. And I'm going to ask you to use the chat from time to time. So if you've got any questions, fire them in the chat. Abaya and Keith will probably monitor the chat, and we'll stop every now and again and take questions. If there's something that's really burning you up, you could probably raise a hand or do something like that, and Abaya can let me know. So how does it feel when you're at an interview? I'm gonna just in the chat, if you've got any thoughts about what you would like out of this evening, just put them in the chat and we'll have a little look at them as we go forward. Because I'd hate to come to the end of this. We've got 2 hours scheduled. I'd hate to come to the end of this 2 hours and half the audience go home thinking they hadn't got what they needed. But about interviews, now it's going to be really important over the next 18 months. The job market is going to be a little bit tighter. And so it's even more important that our interview skills are sharp. And I'm going to give you the usual thing. There are 3 things you need to bear in mind when you're going for an interview. Preparation, preparation, preparation. The topics for today. I'm going to talk about the interview types. I'm going to talk about how you prepare your material, and that includes setting yourself up to answer questions. And then I'm going to talk about how you prepare yourself mentally to turn up and shine. And if everybody's okay with that, we will kick off. burning question. What's in it for an interviewer? What do they want to know when you turn up for an interview? It's really, really simple. They want to know, what's your capability? Can you do the job? What's your motivation? Will you actually do it? And fit. Do you fit in around here? Will you fit in the organization? Will you fit in culturally? How do I know this? Well, I've had lots of jobs over my career. And I've been a line manager since I was about, 25. And you can see that wasn't exactly yesterday. So I reckon I've done hundreds of interviews. Some of them very skillfully, and some of them not so skillfully. And always the issue is, what will this person fit? But the big secret for interviews is that it's not some magical talent you have or you haven't. Doing well at interviews is a skill and like any other, like learning to write or learning something about technology. It's a skill, and with practice, everybody can be good at it. Now, what's really interesting is nobody does an interview for the fun of it. If you get invited to an interview, you can be sure that there's a problem that needs solved. And the interview is the chance for you to show that you are the solution to the problem. If you have done your prep, if you've done your practice, and you follow the rules, you'll automatically take yourself from in the pack to in the top echelon. So let me go straight on. Interview types. When is an interview an interview? Well, have you ever turned up for an interview and you've had a great chat with somebody? And you've built up huge amounts of rapport and you think, I really like that person, they liked me, job done. Well, it's not like that. In my experience, at least half the interviews conducted are done where the interviewer isn't properly prepared. I've been in that situation myself lots of times. Come into work and somebody says, oh, your colleagues all filled today, they've got an interview lined up, can you do it? And you get the CV and the job description and you've got 10 minutes to prepare. You're not ready to do the interview. And I find that lots of interviewers are unprepared because they haven't had the chance to prepare, or maybe they're just not very skillful, they haven't learned how to do interviews. So you'll see that an interview can feel like a chat, people can meander around subjects, and at the end, you think you've done a great job, but you haven't given them the information they need to properly decide and justify the choice that they might want to make. And it's an interviewee's responsibility to hammer home and make clear what it is they have to offer. And sometimes that means taking control. So if you're with an inexperienced interviewer, or one who's not prepared, then sometimes as the interviewee, you need to take control. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So, competency-based interviews are becoming much more the norm. And the thinking behind competency-based interviews is that past behavior basically will tell you whether somebody can do the job or not. Yeah. So if somebody could do something before, the chances are they can do it again. They're often panel-based, and certainly these days, if you go into a large company or a government organization, you'll get a competency-based interview. So what's the benefits? For the organization, they're much more professional. They provide a level of consistency that helps. So if you're recruiting 20 new grads, the chances are by doing competency-based interviews, you get a certain level of consistency across the group. They are indeed good at predicting who is likely to perform well in the role. They're much more objective, they're much more structured, and they're much more likely to avoid anything illegal or inappropriate, like asking somebody their age or their marital status or whether they've got kids or any of the things that we're not allowed to take into account formally when we're making a choice of an employee. That's great for the organization, but for an individual, the real benefit is that preparing for competency-based interviews is generic. You prepare for one, you're prepared for them all. And that's really, really interesting because it means you can do your prep and you can go from one interview to the next with only a little tweak to what you need to know. So what is a competency-based interview? Well, funnily enough, it's about competencies. So if an organization is looking for a role, the chances are they'll, in their HR lexicon, they'll say a person doing this role at this level will need these competencies to these levels. And they might ask a question like, if they're looking for persuasion, they might ask for a question about, tell us about a time when you had to gain a support for an idea or proposal. And you'll see this a lot in competency-based interviews. It's, give me an example of, tell me about a time when. What they're trying to do is get you to give an example so that they can really understand whether you've got those competencies or not. Of course, what they really mean is, how did you go about it? What was the outcome? You can get a good idea of the competence for a job, often in the job description. People will tell you pretty explicitly what they're looking for. If you've got contacts with the organization, and you can sometimes ask the HR people for the competency framework, and they'll happily send it to you, so you'll know. Sometimes you'll be looking at a competency framework by a professional body, and the IET or another professional body will set competency levels. And just think about what dimensions of competency is in the role and what level of competency they are. These are my favorite interviews. When you get invited out for coffee or lunch or dinner, it's not going to happen any time soon, I expect. But when life returns to normal, you get a call from a friend or an ex-colleague who you haven't seen for a while, and they say, oh, come for a coffee. And you've got a little inkling they're going to talk to you about maybe an opportunity that's in their organization. Is it a chat? No, it's an interview. So you turn up as though it's an interview. Be assured it's an ex-colleague, but the rules apply. You still have to do the work to get your message across. Dinner and lunch are tricky. Check out what the etiquette is. Check out where you're going. Check out what the company norms are. And I absolutely advise you, avoid alcohol. If you need a glass of wine or a drink on the side to build rapport, that's fine. Absolutely be prepared to let your host get plastered, but you need to stay sober. Because if it's the other way around, the opportunity's gone. And I also have to advise people to think about what you eat. Pick something that's easy to eat and talk. Don't pick something that's likely to explode in your face. Like when you stab that tomato and it squirts juice right up your shirt. I've done that. So think about what you're eating. Make sure it's easy. You don't have to use your hands. It's just make it easy for yourself because you're going to be doing a lot of talking. panel interviews, multiple interviews. Now in face-to-face, these are tricky because you have to go and you have to make eye contact with everybody and you have to shake hands, or at least we used to. In the short term, it's going to be Zoom and Teams and Blue Jeans and whatever it is, GoToMeeting, whatever technology is the preferred option. Now, when you're face-to-face, you have to make contact with everybody around the table. You have to answer questions, you have to make eye contact. But you can't just scan like this. You have to make a point to this person, move eye contact to somebody else and make another point, move to the middle, maybe giving somebody there. So you have to move around and spread it around. With Zoom, everything else, you just have to look at that little thing there, right in the middle of the screen. That's where the eye contact is. And you have to use your peripheral vision to look and see what they're doing. You know, are they like these guys on the bottom of the slide, half asleep? So you need to be able to do that. Now, a Toastmaster friend of mine gave me this brilliant tip. I'm going to share it with you now. A pair of eyes. Draw them, cut them out, and stick them around your webcam. And that will draw your eyes to the camera. So we don't end up looking at the screen and talking to the screen when actually we need to be talking to the people directly and making eye contact. So that's all interview types, really, really obvious stuff. But it's surprising how many people don't take care of the basics. I said it was about preparation. So we're going to come to preparation. We're going to spend a little bit of time on preparation. Now, humans have evolved through the millennia and the hundreds of millennia to communicate through stories. Most of our tradition has been no written stories. We are hardwired to listen and communicate by stories. And the research shows that people who tell stories are much, much more memorable than people who give facts or opinions. So what we're going to do is we are going to, when we go to an interview, we're going to tell stories. But they're work stories. And they're stories that show off our talents and capabilities. So I'm going to ask a quick question. And if you're on screen, just wave your hand or something. Who has heard of the STAR system of responding to interview questions? Stick your hand up if you heard. Why not? Yeah, a few people. Let me check the other screen. Oh, it's not supposed to happen. Check. Okay, right. Quite a few of you still get your screens off, so I can't tell. So stars, look them up on Google them, look them up. It's a way of telling a story around a competency or around an incident or something you've done. It is absolutely the crux of how you answer any interview question. So what's a STAR? It's a structure. And it says, basically, what's the situation? Give me the context. Tell me what you set out to do and achieve. Tell me what you did. Tell me what the results were. And that's STAR. First point to note is the action. Tell me what you did. If I'm an interviewer, I want to know what you did. So when I hear somebody say, we did this and we did that, I don't know what their part in it was. So even if it's a little bit uncomfortable, you have to get used to saying, my job was, my role was, what I did was. And some people find that quite difficult, but you have to get used to doing it. Because otherwise the interviewer just knows what a group of people did. You also need to add in the benefits. Yeah. So if the result was we delivered on time and to budget, why was that important? What makes it relevant? Especially what makes it relevant to the interviewers. So STARBs. That's what the B is, the benefits. Now we're going to do a little STARBs exercise. And I want you to just spend a minute thinking of something you're proud of having achieved. And I don't care for the moment whether this is work, whether it's personal life, anything at all. Just spend a couple of minutes. I don't care if it's your 10-meter swimming badge, but just something you're a little bit proud of doing. Everybody got something? Just give me a wave if you can think of something that, yeah, everybody more or less that has got a screen on is waving a hand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you into pairs in a breakout group. And what I want you to do is build a STARB around that thing that you're proud of. So what I want you to do is in pairs, the first person to tell the story. And I want you to do it, and it may not come easily, and it's probably worth taking a picture of the screen now, because once you go into breakout groups, you won't see the screen. So I want you to give me the context. I want you to tell me what you set out to do and what made it hard. And then what did you do? What was the result? What was the benefits? Okay. And I want the partner to coach and draw out the points to make, because normally we are pretty rubbish at this. And often somebody outside of us can see everything that's great about it, but we are in the story and we self-deprecate and we don't understand. So the partner's job is to draw out the points to make. And then finally, when you hear the story, and you've got it kind of sorted in your head, what does it say about the person you're talking to? You know, does it say they're tenacious? Does it say they work hard? Does it say that they're results focused? What does it say? So I want you to spend maybe 7 minutes or so on the first person, then swap over. And this might, if you haven't done this before, it might feel a bit strange. So don't sweat it too much. It's just to get the practice. So Abaya or Keith, would you set up the breakout rooms, please, for pairs?
Yep, I'll do that.
So and I may end up getting assigned to a breakout room, but I'm quite happy if I end up there. That's okay.
Yeah, I'm just going to recreate all the rooms. So a couple of things before I do that. Oh, hang on. It wants to do that.
You might want to also explain how to get back to the main room.
Do you want to do that over there? Because we can force them back anyway.
Yeah, we'll bring everybody back after 15 minutes. Are you going to set up the breakout rooms so people automatically go, or are you going to ask them to accept it?
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just...
So guys, it's 7 o'clock UK time. We'll come back here about 15:15. But please use the opportunity to find your partner and have a little practice at this.
Yeah, so remember when you go into the room to come off mute, or else the other person won't be able to hear you. There is the other caveat that if you're on an unsupported device, you won't end up in the breakout room. So, and you'll stay in the main room, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. We'll see how many end up in this main room. Okay, I'm just about to press the button.
So welcome back, everybody. Is everybody back now, Keith? I'm just trying to find the number of participants. 29. So we've got a couple more still to come back. Okay.
Yeah, they should be back by now.
Right, okay. So I'm looking at the chat, and there's some really nice points being made on the chat, so thank you for that. Jitendra, about soft skills, absolutely right. When you get invited for an interview, assuming somebody has read your CV, and assuming that you're like most people who probably undersell themselves a little bit in their CV, the chances are that you already have demonstrated you have the technical skills to do the job. There might be a little bit of confirming that when you get there, but they're doing that bit around the fit. Will you fit here? Can you interact with people? Because every job these days is a team job. Almost nobody is an individual contributor entirely. So they're looking, will you fit in here? Can you communicate? Have you got the soft skills to do what you need to do?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Gabriella, ask me at the end about the preparing for presentations and having to do a presentation. Okay, so stick some stuff on the chat if you like. Quick review. How easy was it to tell the story?
Yeah, for me, it took a little time to, think about the story and then tell the story. So
yeah. Did everybody else find it kind of new? Tricky with no prep. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've just brought out the first rule, tricky with no prep. And we'll cover that in a minute. So, what about STARBs? STARBs are your PPE for interviews. They're your bulletproof vest. You need to have a mix of about 10, ideally. 12 if you can. Try not to have less than about 8. And it's okay to have one or two STARBs that demonstrate some things about you that maybe aren't about work. Maybe you work you're a school governor, or you do something for charity, or you do something else. Maybe you play sports, but you do something else outside your work that's relevant, and you can make relevant because it shows some of your competencies. It's okay to have some STARBs on that. But what are STARBs about? Dan brought it up there. It's hard to prepare things just and pluck a response to an interview question out of thin air. If we've already prepared our STARBs, and we've got 10 of them, so you've got a little mental filing cabinet of STARBs, of stories that demonstrate competencies. So when the interviewer says, give me an example of, tell me about, it's not a case of mentally trying to remember up here, what was that, and think of all the things. Construct it in, try to get the language right, pitch it at the right level, get all the facts in order. You've already done that. All you have to worry about is which STARB best fits the question. And then you can deliver it. So they give you a lot more time to think in an interview. And they build your confidence. So what you need to practice them, because you need to deliver them smoothly. When we tell a story, think about a story you heard as a child. You could just deliver that, whether it's the Three Bears or whatever story you might have been told as a child, you could deliver that easily, no problem. Because the wiring in your brain is there. The neural network is established. You know how to tell that story. When you build a STARB, you need to learn how to tell the story. You need to learn how to tell it concisely and quickly. If it takes 5 minutes to tell your response to an interview question, I guarantee you'll see the guys glazing up. You'll see their attention wander, their eyes will lose focus. Crisp them up, get them down to 1 or 2 minutes and practice them. Practice them in front of the mirror. Record yourself on your PC. Try them on your friends. Try them on your family. Try them on the dog. And when you see people start to lose focus, you know they're not crisp enough. So work them. And of course, the more you've worked them, the slicker you'll get, and the better you'll be able to wordsmith exactly the right word. So when an interview comes and somebody says, tell me about a time when, that one, delivered smoothly and confidently, because you're used to it. It's no different to telling a 2-year-old a bedtime story. So your starbs are your protection. They are absolutely what you are, the core of your interview prep. Do them, and I guarantee if you've got 10 of them, you will be able to answer 80% of the questions in an interview from stuff you're already prepared. And that's a lot different to coming in and making it all up on the fly. Because when you deliver something smoothly and confidently, of course, you look in control. You look composed. You're not flustered. So work on your starbs. That is the most important thing. There's one message you take away tonight, it's that. Here's one of my starbs. Doesn't matter how you draw them up. This was a mind map. You can draw them as bullet points. You can draw them any way you like. The main thing is write them out so that as you practice them, you get slicker and slicker and slicker, and you get them crisper and crisper and crisper. So you see, there's very few words there, and I used to be able to tell that in a minute, even though it was quite a long, complicated story. Now, I am going to give you a second piece of advice, and it is as important as starbs. I'm going to recommend there is the book, the manual for interviews. You can see it on the book. I have a copy. This is the ancient one, and you can see how old the pages are. They've all gone yellow. This is the current version, and you can get it on Kindle. It's by a guy called Alan Jones, and he takes you through the interview process stage by stage by stage. And a lot of the next section is, frankly, stolen from Alan Jones. Now, I gave this book to my niece, who is mid-20s. She was going for an interview for a internet marketing company. And it's so hip, they don't have an organizational structure. It's a holacracy. And when I turned and gave her this little book with its yellowing pages, she looked at it a bit, could see the nose sniffing. She read it, and she said, she went for the interview, she got the job, and she said, I can't believe that. There was a scenario in that book which I thought couldn't possibly happen. But it happened, and I was ready for it. So I'm going to suggest it's no more than a 2-hour read. You read this, you're going to be a long way up the understanding of the mindset of an interviewer and how to deal with questions. And that's the next section. So Mr. Jones says, and he boils it down really nicely. He boils it into 2 questions. The why should I hire you questions and why shouldn't I hire you questions. 2 very different things. So these ones, why should I hire you, are positive selling questions. And these ones are the ones that are set to trip you up. And you'll find that different interviewers will have a balance one side or the other. But you can learn to handle both. So this question is a question you must be able to answer. Tell me about yourself. Because when you turn up and that interviewer isn't prepared, the first thing they're going to say, and I've done this, is they're going to say, tell me about yourself. And while you're giving your 1 minute, 2 minute elevator pitch about yourself, they're reading your CV and trying to work out what the next question is going to be. So, done well, this is a fabulous opportunity. Done badly, and you can lose the interview before it's even started. What's really good about questions and interviews, of course, is if you tell just the right amount of information, you can leave things out. You can leave the obvious next question. So on that previous starb of mine, basically I learned French from zero to being able to present and work in French in 9 months, which is kind of unusual in the UK. We don't have a facility for languages, apparently. And of course, when I tell that starb, I know the next question is, well, how did you do that? And of course, the answer was really bloody hard work. But when I tell that starb, I know that's the next question. So you can do that.
Eddie, I'm just checking you're not sharing. I don't know if you're...
Oh, I didn't know that. How long have I not been sharing?
Probably since we came back in the room.
Oh, sugar. Let me...
Didn't really matter when you were waving the books around.
No, that's fine. That's fine. We'll try and share again. I will try and share again. That's interesting, isn't it? Every time you play with technology, you just have to... This is #1 rule of presentations. And I would say it doesn't matter whether I go to a big company. I was in McKinsey's a few days before lockdown. Huge, great office block in the centre of London. Enormous area to speak in. Yes, we'll have a laptop. Yes, we'll have this. Yes, we'll have that. I turn up and there's a screen. And if I hadn't brought my laptop, if I hadn't brought some sound capability, it would have been a disaster. So you have to be aware that technology is not your friend when you're speaking. Right, here we go. Right, share. I need to get to here. And I need to share my screen. And let's go there. Excuse me, guys. Just takes a little time when you, there we go. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yes. So 2 sorts of questions. Positive selling questions, trip up questions. Tell me about yourself. Absolutely need to do that. So here's some questions. Are these good or bad questions? Stick your thumbs up if you think it's a good question. Stick your thumb down if you think it's a bad question. Some thumbs up going up. Absolutely. These questions are positive. What about these ones? Yeah, absolutely. Andrew's very emphatic. Lots of people. These are bad questions. These are trip-up questions. And these ones can go either way. So what's the general rule? The questions that are positive, as we say, they're looking for your strengths. The questions that are negative, they're looking to expose your weaknesses and find reasons not to take you on. These ones here, depending on how you answer them, they can be either way. So what's the general rules? If you have a positive "why should I hire you" question, It's looking for a strength. So make those strengths absolutely something you have, own, they're you, and they're important. If you get asked a question that's negative, if it's seeking weaknesses, then effectively you want to put those into the past. Because you don't want somebody thinking there's a bloody good reason not to employ them. But you can't avoid these questions. So occasionally you'll get away with overuse of a strength. But don't make it a crappy one like, I work too hard, because that just looks, But put your weaknesses in the past, emphasize that you're now aware of your weaknesses and you've learned. And then you have to give an example of how you manage it and make sure that it's not a problem now. So hopefully that seems, once these things get pointed out, hopefully it seems obvious. If you need help on public speaking, try these guys. Turn up at a Toastmasters meeting and they will envelop you in warm friendliness, and they will teach you how to speak and be confident speaking in public, whether that's 5 people at a team meeting or 5,000 at a huge conference. Nice incremental program. I can recommend Toastmasters. Now, when we get to negotiating questions, what is the answer to this? How important is money to you? Well, if you say, money is super important to me, I really, it's absolutely primary thing. This doesn't sound like you're really interested in the job. So you have to kind of go, we've all got bills to pay, we've all got outgoings, so money's important, but it's not everything. Some variation of that. Are you having discussions with other organizations? No, I am not going to tell you to lie, but the answer here is yes. The neuroscience and psychology of scarcity makes a commodity much more valuable. If the world was full of gold, it wouldn't be valuable. So you need to make it, you need to imply that you're a scarce commodity. And one of the ways of doing that is to imply, you don't have to say it, but you need to say you are looking at other opportunities. So you might say, you are the first organization I'm talking to. I will be talking to others fairly soon. If you don't like outright lying, and I don't ever tell people that they should lie, but you have to imply that what you've got, lots of other people want. And it's almost certainly true. How does this role compare to others? That's a negotiating question. That's testing how much do you want the job? What was your previous salary? Now, this is a hot topic. Do you tell them or don't you? Well, the answer is up to you. How do most employers work? Look at your current salary and they go, yes, we want this person. Let's offer them 10% more. And that's the offer. Now, that might not be the going rate for the job. You could have come from a sector which doesn't pay very well. So you need to realize that also that salary, your present salary, doesn't necessarily mean what your worth is. Also, sometimes organizations use salary as a proxy for seniority. So if they're looking for somebody very senior and they've got a salary in mind of 150,000 a year, and you say you're on 60,000, they are going to go, not the person for the job. So you need to be really careful about sharing your salary. I don't say don't do it, but understand if you do, it will be used to A, judge whether you're senior enough, and B, to set an offer. And I know I've done this. I've brought people to my organization, paying them below the going rate with a thought saying, you know, if they're really good, I'll bump them up in 6 months or 9 months. But if they'd negotiated hard, they would have probably got the going rate from day one. But it was risk management on my part. The same thing, but what salary are you seeking? If you know the going rate, that's easy. If you don't know what the internal rates are, you have to decide. And there's no hard and fast advice on this. You just have to think through the consequences. But these are negotiating prices. When you start to get here, the indication is that you've ticked pretty well the boxes on capability, motivation, and fit. Now, if you have been, and this happens quite a lot, especially in times of lots of unemployment, redundancy, kind of like now, you'll get people moving from a senior role to maybe a less senior role. And of course, if you say my salary was X and the new salary is 2/3 X, they may think, oh, this person won't take it. They won't want to do the job, blah, blah, blah. So it's up to you to say, yeah, I understand I'm moving from a role which was maybe more senior, better paid, but I really want to do this job. I really, really want to do this job. And I'm okay with the cut in salary that goes with it. So you may need to be absolutely explicit with that. Now, at the end of the interview, center on the role and the organization. Yeah, questions. What happens if you somebody says, you got any questions? And you go, no, don't have any questions. I've done that. Mistake. What does it say when you say, I haven't got any questions? Well, it says you're not really very interested. So even if during the interview they answer every single question you have, go back and revisit them. Ask a few questions. Like your starbs, have 7 or 8 questions to hand. And they can be about the culture, they can be about the salary, they can be about the exact scope of work, about anything. But have at least 7 or 8 ready. When they ask you, have you got any questions, it's your chance to get a sales message across. So you can tell them that you're really interested in the role. And don't leave without telling them that you are. Even if you're only half sure that you want the role, tell them that you are. You can always refuse an offer, but you can't make one come once they've decided not to give you it. Close with a positive statement so you can of what you can offer them. You know, I'm really confident I can do the job. I've got these great skills, whether it's in, I don't know, analog design, or whether it's in digital, whatever it is, or I'm a system engineer, whatever it is, I've got these skills. Bang, bang, bang. And I really want to do this because, put it together, give them the message that you just can't wait to get there on that first day. So, questions from the website shows you researched. Good question is, why has the vacancy arisen? Is it because they've restructured? Is it because they're expanding and a new vacancy has arisen? Is it because they didn't have somebody internal who was mature enough, or did the person who was doing the role get promoted? It's really useful to know these things. How would you like to see your organization develop? Because that gets an idea of what their vision is. Now I'm going to give you the question that has worked best for me in dozens of interviews. There's a little bit of NLP and psychology in this. So, if I were to join this organization, where would you see me in 2 years' time? That's a kind of okay question. Put it like this. If I were to join this organization and I was the most successful hire you'd ever made, what would be different in 2 years' time? Now, why does that work better? Because you're asking them to imagine you doing the job. So they have to construct a scenario of you doing the job. As soon as they've done that once, it's easier for them to do it when it comes to thinking about should they make you an offer. You then ask them to say, imagine you being successful, really successful in that job. And then you ask them to imagine all the problems that would be solved. And that's a really powerful way of taking somebody in a journey from, here's a stranger in front of me, to here's somebody I've worked with in over 2 years who's been a great asset to the organization. And it's just a little bit of psychology, but it works really well. So, done the interview, you're about to go. There are always surprises. Can I introduce you to this person? Can I introduce that? It's really easy as you leave an interview to kind of think, as the tension goes out and you leave the room. So beware of relaxing too early. Stay focused. Wait till you're in the car or on the bus or on the train before you let that go. But you can use the journey to and from the interview room to the front door to ask simple, how many people are you seeing? What's going to happen next? All that, those sorts of questions that let you just pull information out about what's likely to happen. And that's the interview done. And they're ready to give you an offer, you hope. A couple of other points. Face-to-face interviews, if you're seeing somebody senior, the chances are they'll send somebody to pick you up from reception. Be nice to them. Be pleasant, be warm, because they'll be asked what they thought. Same with if somebody takes you back to reception. Tell them how much you enjoyed the interview, how you're really looking forward to joining the company, because that message will get back. Treat the journey to the interview as though you're already on the interview. I'm always reminded of a story of a guy, and I heard this secondhand, but it was his friend who did this, a colleague of mine. His friend's driving to the interview and a car cuts him up at the lights. And he was really annoyed. He was a bit tense going to the interview. And so he puts his foot down and he catches this person up on the lane next to them at the lights, and he's giving them all sorts of gestures and gesticulating and yelling at them. Gets it out of his system, drives to the interview, gets picked up in reception, shown into the interview room, and guess who's sitting opposite him, So an interview starts the minute you leave. Stay cool, stay calm. Everybody is potentially the person you're going to meet in that new organization. So let me just stop sharing for a minute and we'll have a look at the chat and see what's come up. So if we've got any questions so far, we will take them. Okay, Michael, talk about a time. Good question, this because it does come up. It is a standard one. Tell me about how you deal with conflict. Everybody wants to know how you deal with conflict. And you haven't got a work example. Now that in itself is interesting. Michael, I don't know how old you are, but unless you're a new grad or 1 or 2 years in, you've been through a few situations where conflict could have arisen. So have a think about why it is that you don't seem to bump into conflict at work. Or you can say, I've never been at work, but here's an example from outside work. That's okay. The main thing is they're interested in how you manage that conflict. How do you deal with it? Do you run away? Do you take it face on? Do you think around it? Do you use other people to resolve it? What's your conflict management strategy? That's what they're looking for. So good question. Daniel, should you share experiences where the outcome was overtly negative? I would say, if you can't find a positive outcome or a learning experience that is really valuable, I would just avoid it. Yeah, because if you go and say, I worked in this organization and it was terrible, and this and this and this and this went wrong, they're only going to just imagine all of that happening if you join them. So if there's a negative experience, I would leave it. I would just avoid it. If you can't avoid it, make sure you can say, this happened, but I learned this, this, and this, or we as an organization learned this, this, and this. So but avoid. If you can't make it positive in the end, avoid. Okay, what's my weakness? All right, we'll come to this. We'll come to this in a minute. Because we're going to give you another exercise to do. We've got 45 minutes. Yeah, we've got time for an exercise. Weakness. Right. Okay. Let me go back to sharing again. PowerPoint slideshow. And hopefully you can see. Yeah, fingers up. Andrew, can you see the slides? Perfect. So you've had the interview and you're back at home. Take some notes. While it's fresh, what happened? Nobody writes these days. Email them. Thank them. Be polite. Restate the fact you want the interest. And if there's a question you just didn't get right, you just stumbled over, by now you've had time to think about what the right answer should have been. So send them back and say, I really struggled with that question, but of course, thinking about it, this is what I should have. This is what I should have said. You lose no brownie points for that. You actually might just make a small tweak in their thinking. Always worth doing. And let me just go back a sec. Even if you get a no, write back, say thank you very much. Loved the interview. I'm really disappointed I can't. You haven't got a post from me. I'm interested if another one comes up, because many organizations will turn off the non-preferred candidate. They'll see 3 people, 4 people, they'll pick somebody, turn 3 off. And of course, that other candidate might go, I've got an offer from somebody else. Sorry, I'm not coming. So by responding positively to a refusal, you leave yourself still in the frame. So it's not over till that person actually joins the company. Okay, so what I'm going to do, what I'd like to do is I'd like to give you a chance to practice a negative question. So Keith, would you like to set us up in groups of 3? And what I'd like you to do is come to it with either one of those questions that you've seen tonight or your own particular bête noire. What's the thing you least want to hear? What's the question that you fear most? And that's why You know, what's your greatest weakness? That's why I left that one, because it's many people's favorite scary question. So what I'd like you to do is get in groups of 3. I'd like one person to start. This is my least favorite question, and then try and answer it. I want the other 2 people to coach and suggest and help ways to answer that question. Then after 2 or 3 or 4 minutes, swap around, give somebody else a go. So we'll give about 10 minutes to do this and try and just get a practice at thinking and using somebody else to help you think through answers to difficult questions. So remember the rules. If it's a negative question, long past, something you've dealt with, and this is how you handle it now. Okay, Keith, does that sound okay? Can you do that?
Yep. So there'll be a couple of rooms with 4 people in.
That's fine.
That's the way the cookie crumbles. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
I'm just going to send you all into your rooms.
All right, we'll all be whisked off to a parallel universe any minute now. So welcome back, everybody. Great if you can stick your camera on. If you're worried about your background, your messy kitchen or whatever, you can always put on in Zoom, you can put on a fake background, so that'd be fabulous. So what we got? We've got one from Dan here. Okay, so Dan's challenging for people who haven't got the Zoom is that he's been a stay-at-home dad for 4 years and feels that his starbs aren't relevant or up to date. And I guess that's a real worry, but probably not as big a worry as you think, because people tend to believe that our qualities and our competencies are pretty much stable. If you're going to be doing a highly technical role, so if, let's say you were in the field of AI and you'd been out of touch for 4 years, then your technical skills might look a little bit rusty. So you might have to do something to polish them up and have something to show. So you might need to do a course or something, but there's lots of stuff available you can do on that. The fit stuff is going to be old, but if you've been a stay-at-home dad, you'll have at least a couple of really good starbs from dealing with your kids. Kids are just like adults in the workplace. In fact, they're even trickier. I noticed that mums coming back from maternity, handling kids, are much more adept with the adults in the workplace. So a couple of starbs on that. Maybe you've had to deal with stuff around the parenting, dealing with schools, dealing with hospitals. Find starbs that are relevant to that show how you deal with authority, how you deal with conflict, how you deal with being said no to, all those things. But just look for the competencies outside too. And the stuff you did before you went on a career break, that'll have good starbs in it. And of course, you can talk about the principles why you are a stay-at-home dad. I worked with one guy because I have a lot of private clients who come to me because they want to change job. And he'd been a stay-at-home dad for 2 years because his wife died and his 12-year-old was in really a critical stage. So he gave up work to look after her. And by the time he'd spent a little bit of time thinking about that and what it said about him, he realized he had lots of qualities to sell. So I can just say that, Dan, that look for the things that say something about you, regardless of whether they were in work or not. What else have we got? Internet terrible in Wales, so coming off video, Anthony, okay. Any advice how to beat the automated filters on CVs? Aha, hard that one, isn't it? It's really a bit outside a little bit outside the interview, but I've heard people say, you know, a lot of the filters just look for keywords. And I know people who put text in white space on a CV with keywords, so that the filters pick it up, but the humans don't. So if you could imagine a white space at the bottom and a footer, say, you could put some keywords in the footer, and it just gives you a chance to hit keywords without having to write them in big sentences. But that's the only thing I can do other than knowing what's relevant in your field. Okay, so let's move on. Let me share again. I'm going to press share. I'll just look at the screen and check that people can see. Can you see the screen? Thumbs up. Dan? Kabaya? Yeah, excellent. So you're going for an interview. Big deal. How do you get yourself prepared so you're not a nervous wreck? This is my favorite bit. How do you deal with the nerves? Because you know what it's like when you get nervous, you get tongue-tied, your mouth goes dry, you can't get your words out, your hands are shaking, you've got to shake somebody's hand, and you just don't look like the person, you know, for the first few minutes that they want to see. And we all know that first impressions count a lot. It's said that some interviewers have already made up their mind in a couple of minutes. And I know that when I did a lot of interviewing, I'd have formed an opinion within 5, and the rest of the interview was testing whether I got it right or wrong. So you want to come across as really, really confident. So what can we do? I usually ask people to write down a couple of adjectives about how they would like to feel when they go for an interview. How do you want to feel to be successful? And usually we get things like confident, we get things like energetic, we get lots of different adjectives come up. But actually, what I want you to do is your own private haka. Because when you look at these All Blacks here, that's what they're doing. They are partly psyching themselves up. They're also, I think, psyching out the English team in the front. But the whole business of the haka is about them getting themselves prepared for the tussle and the challenge that's coming up. Now I'm going to ask a quick question. Let me just see if I can put you guys, I'll put you guys over there so I can see as many of you as possible. Hands up, thumbs up if you've heard of Amy Cuddy. Okay. So Amy Cuddy is a behavioral scientist, psychologist. And she picked up on the NLP thing, which says that how you use your body affects how your brain is thinking. So if you're slouched down in a chair, yeah, the chances are you'll be low energy. And remember at school, they always used to get you to sit up, and they did that because it worked. So what Amy Cuddy did was she did a huge number of experiments. And what she did was she proved that people who do power poses feel different. And what she did was she did a whole pile of tests and looked at hormones in the bloodstream, and also made a number of got a number of results on that. And the scientific community jumped on her because they couldn't reproduce the changes in cortisol levels in the blood. And this has gone on for 5 years. And then last year, suddenly they all went, yeah, we can't see the cortisol in the blood and we can't see this. But what coaches like me know is it works. And suddenly the scientific team went, oh yeah, I suppose if you ignore all of the fact that you can't measure the changes in hormone levels, but people do feel better and people react to them differently. So what I want you to do is in your own private space, and it's really good if you've got your camera turned off for this bit, I want you to do a power pose. And a power pose is, you've just, let me scroll back. Yes, I've just won something. Yeah, Superman, power pose. Find a power pose and hold it. I want you to hold it for 1.5 minutes. And I'm going to keep talking while you hold your power pose. Normally, when I'm do this in the room, I get somebody to come up the front and do a haka, which is hugely entertaining for me, embarrassing for them, but yeah, it provides a bit of light. But I'll guarantee you, at the end, when they've done a haka, they feel $1 million. Now, I'm not suggesting that you do your haka in reception when you turn up. But if you sneak off to the loos and do a power pose and hold it for 90 seconds, it will change how you feel. It will change how you hold yourself. And when you walk in the room, people will react to you differently. You will look confident and they will treat you as somebody who's confident. So absolutely, rule number 1, do your power pose. And I reckon T minus 10 minutes. Now we're going into the world of NLP for a minute. You'll see my thumb, forefinger. You can use your thumb and forefinger to store emotions and confidence. And what you do is you create a link between a feeling and a physical action, so that whenever you want that feeling, you do the physical action. It's partly why power poses work. Do that, you feel good. You can do it much, much more surreptitiously. And some people are prepared to do this, and they're the more adventurous ones, and they get the benefit, and other people go, looks a bit weird, I'm not going to do this. But you're on your own, nobody can see you, so I'm going to ask you to just go with this, give it a try. Just take a couple of relaxing breaths. You're on your own, nobody can see you, except I can see straight through. What I want you to do is think of a time, and it doesn't matter when it was, from the age of 3 upwards, when you were supremely confident. And when you've got that time, I want you to imagine that you're floating back in time so you're right at that very moment. And float inside yourself at that moment. And just listen. Look through your own eyes and see what's happening around you. And listen. Hear what's happening. And feel that time when you were confident. Just want you to feel that confidence and enjoy it. And as you feel that confidence, I want you to take your finger and thumb and squeeze them together, just like that. But hold the confidence. Stay in that moment when you felt confident. Just hold it for a few seconds. And let it go. Our brains create synapses at a phenomenal rate. And it's the only way we can learn, because we have to change the wiring in our brain to learn something. And if you really felt that confidence there, and you squeezed your thumb and finger together, you've created a link. Your brain has learned that is confidence. Now, this sounds absolutely nuts, but it is well demonstrated. It's a fundamental technique in NLP for building people's confidence. I did this when I was at Network Rail. We were doing a big project. We needed something like 10 million quid to do a study into how we were going to fix document management. And the program manager who worked for me and was running this, we had to go to the board and ask for the money. And it so happened that I wasn't going to be around. I was going to be somewhere else. So she was going to have to go and ask the money. So we did this exercise a couple of days beforehand. And then things changed and I was at the board meeting. But she was already prepped and up she went. And I could see her a little bit nervous just as she stood up, ready to go. I could see her do this. And I saw her straighten up and do a really good presentation. 4-minute presentation. This is why we want all this money. Yes, I know you've spent gazillions of pounds on it already, but we need more. And then the questions came, and there was one question in particular that was difficult. And I could see the nervousness, and then she did that again. And I watched the body language change, and I watched her deliver a really good answer. Fantastic. I did this with some school kids when we were talking about personal resilience. And we did this with a 17-year-old. And her only comment after she'd done this, we made her do a speech in public, having done that, was, it's well weird, isn't it? So I recommend you try it. If you want to stack more emotions on top, you might want confidence, you might want to put in feeling and control, you might want to put feeling energized, you might want to put lots of things, you can stack them on top. Just keep adding them in. Take a little break, break state, come back to normal, then find another memory. You can stack them for yourself and it really works. So we are 10 minutes to go. I think I'm going to leave it open for questions and we'll go on the chat now. I'll stop sharing, we'll go on chat. If anybody, there should be somewhere in the participants panel where you can raise your hand, I think, as well. So, but by all means, stick the questions on chat and we'll try and deal with them. Anything at all on interviews, running up to interviews, whatever. Nothing coming up. Okay, so for the moment, we are not going to be doing much face-to-face interviews. It'll be Zoom. So I want you to think about interviews by video. The rules are more or less the same. You still have to do your startups. You still have to do the prep. You still have to do the prep. You still have to be prepared to answer the questions in the same way. The difference is you're not in a room. They can't see you. So you can be newsreader at the top, and you can do what I've deliberately done tonight, have shorts underneath. You can do that. It's probably better not to, just in case you have to get up and walk away. But the thing is, you need to think about how you look. Now, I'm just looking, I'd like you to look at the screen with all of the participants around. So, just look and see who looks good on the screen. Now, Andrew's just put his screen on, and he is nicely in the center of the screen. He's got a piece of artwork that's growing out of his ear. So maybe you would want to just move that. There is somebody called user up in my top right, and the light is behind. And so what's happened is, of course, the camera is setting the exposure levels for the light coming from the window, and his face is in shadow. So it's important to be lit from the front evenly so you can be seen. Now, if I looked at Dan, he's nicely lit. He's a bit bright on one side, but he's pretty very nice and square in the center. But if I look at Daniel, Daniel's off the side, so he's just a little bit. I'm really pleased to see there is nobody with a laptop on their desk and the camera pointing up through their nose. That is not a great look. Your interviewer does not want to see the inside of your nostrils. Unless you're going for a job as an ENT specialist, it's probably not. I don't think so. Kevin, he's looking good. He's in the middle of the screen, nicely lit, a little bit on one side from the window on his right, but very good. Keith, you see, has put in an artificial background. He's used the Zoom virtual background facility. And that's great if you can't be somewhere where it is, where you can get rid of the clutter. I'm in my office tonight, and usually when I'm here, I put in a virtual background. So you can see my printers and everything else. Abaya's nice there. The camera's a little bit low, so we're looking up at him. Be great if he got the camera at eye level or even just a fraction above. Tanya's come on, see her coming there. Now the other thing, of course, if we go close to the camera, most webcams are pretty wide angle. So if we just move a little bit closer, everything gets made bigger, which when you have a nose the size of mine isn't a great thing. So probably best if you can to be just a little bit away from the camera. So if you do move forward, you don't get the amplification effect too much. I'm hoping that phone will be picked up and go to voicemail. So what else can I say? We talked about lighting. You need to be, obviously, when you're doing an interview, you need to be somewhere where you can talk comfortably. Yeah, probably don't want to be in a coffee shop if they're open. You probably want to be somewhere where you're not going to have the family wandering in and out if you can help it. So try and arrange that there's not going to be any noise, that you've got some peace, you've got some space to think.
Got a few more points and questions, Eddie.
Yeah. Far away, Keith.
Is it a good idea to have a portfolio of stars ready on an Excel spreadsheet?
Yes.
I guess it's all part of preparation.
My starbs used to be on an Excel spreadsheet because I kept track of them. I ported them into a mind mapping package. But the main thing is you want to know your starbs so you don't have to look at them. You don't have to think about them. They're just like there. So you've got to practice them so you can just, you don't have to think. You don't have to make any new connections in your brain. Your brain knows how to reproduce them. And that way, when somebody asks, you don't need to be looking at a spreadsheet. But so starbs are like that. You're bound to get the odd question. If you can have props up in the front, I saw somebody asked about props. Absolutely. But remember, when you've got props, the temptation is to look at the props and not at the camera. So try and maintain eye contact. But props are great. I mean, props tonight, I pulled these out, which was just as well because the slide showing them didn't work. So yeah, anything else?
So sort of complementary to what you've just been saying, Michael was saying, would you use props like a notepad and pen so that you're actually making notes during the interview?
Yes, and tell them you're making notes. Because when it comes to the end and they ask you questions, if you've got a few key bullet points, it'll help you remember what you want to ask. So yes, by all means, tell them you're going to be taking notes. And that also means that if you look down for a minute while you write something, they'll just know you're taking notes. Absolutely.
And Anthony saying that in interview questions, he finds he digresses and then forgets the actual question you went to ask in the first place.
Yeah.
So
Answer to that, know your starbs, Anthony. If you know your starbs, you hear the question, and before you've gone off onto a long, winding story, you've picked your starbs, you've practiced it, it's going to take you a minute or 90 seconds to tell it, and you've told it, and then you're on to the next question.
Kevin made a comment that he was in a Zoom interview recently, and he was probably slouched over too much and it affected his energy.
Yeah.
So sit in a proper office chair or dining room chair.
Yep.
Not on the sofa.
Okay. Now then, I'm going to ask people a question. Think of the most belligerent, demanding chief executive or boss you've ever worked with. Imagine them in a meeting room. When they're demanding, they're not slouched over like this. They're sitting up in their chair and they are straight. So, two things. Credibility, a credible pose is straight up and down. And if you're making a gesture, a hands down gesture, it's absolutely important we do this. You don't need to slap the table, but a downward gesture with your hand, straight up and down, is a very credible pose. The way you get that is to stick your backside hard against the back of the chair. That makes you sit up, not slouch. You look credible. You also, and this is particularly important for women, is to lower the register of how you speak. So if you speak in a squeaky voice like this, you won't be credible. If you want to be credible, you lower the register a little bit and speak much more monotone. Think of the pilot in the plane. Their voice is evenly modulated, hardly any modulation at all. And they speak, even the female pilots speak quite a low register. Think of Maggie Thatcher. If you can remember that far back, you see the old videos. They had to teach her to speak almost as low as a man, because that gave her a lot more credibility. So yes, don't slouch, sit up. And if you find yourself sliding down because your office chair is like that, just heave yourself back up, backside at the back of the chair. If you want to look approachable, do the Lady Di thing. 15-degree tilt on your head, angular, move your arms, remodulate your voice.
There's one question, Eddie. Kevin Graham is asking, instead of tell me about yourself question, they change it around and ask, what are you looking for?
Oh, what are you looking for? Now there is a really good question. And it's a case of, what are you looking for? And not everybody's different, of course, but you might be able to say something, I'm looking for a job where I can really make a difference. Well, where I can come in every day and make something happen. You could say, I'm looking for a job where I help other people. You could say, I'm looking for a job that's intellectually stimulating and demanding. You can ask for anything you like. What are you looking for? Of course, if you've got sense, you'll try and make it so that it broadly fits with the job description. But yeah, by all means, for the soft skills, the things, the satisfaction you get out of the job. Yeah. So for me, it was often, I want a job that makes a difference to the bottom line. I didn't want a job that was, I was a really good engineer, but I really decided I liked doing things that managed other people and made the difference to the business. So find out what pushes your buttons, and then you'll be much more authentic when you're asked that one.
No more questions in the chat.
No more questions in the chat. Okay. Anybody got anything coming up? We've still got 30 people online. So if anybody's got anything anything to ask, I often get asked about, because a lot of my work is how do I find a job that I like? And I usually, just so you know, there's some good books out. There's What Color Is Your Parachute? This is my favorite. How to Get a Job You Love by a guy called John Lees. Really good speaker. You see him, get a chance to see him. But the book is really good because it takes you through the process of what is it that I want? What's important to me? And how do I go about finding a job? It's a really good book about understanding yourself and therefore what sort of job will fit. And it's great for people who are doing a career transition.
Perhaps can we take last two questions? We're almost time.
That's a new message. We got a good idea of a portfolio stars. Ah, right. This is a really good question, Jitendra. And it's a favorite of management consultancies. You've used the example here, how many petrol stations are there in the UK? They might ask you something like, how many piano tuners are there in the UK? And you know what? It doesn't really matter what the answer is, as long what they're looking for is what your thinking process is. So something like that is, yeah, you have no idea. So you're going to make some assumptions. So you might say, okay, so how many households, let's say if it was piano tutors, you say, in my experience, maybe 1 in 20 of the households that I know have got a piano. So there are 70 million people in the UK, so we can guess there's going to be something like 20 million households, or yeah, it doesn't matter what the number is, I'm making them up on the fly. So if 1 in 20 households has a piano, that's 1 million houses that need their piano tuned. And people probably get their, you know, a keen person might get their piano tuned every quarter, so an average might be every year, and maybe some people it's every 2 or 5 years. So let's just say on average it's a year. So then you've got to, there's 20 million visits per year. It takes an hour and you just do the numbers. So they're interested in your thinking process. They don't really care what the answer is. They're trying to work out whether you can solve a problem, whether you can make assumptions. And of course, you make assumptions. You say, I'm just making this up. If I needed to answer this, I would go and get the stats and do it properly. But you demonstrate your thinking process. That's how you do those ones. And I used to know the answer to why a manhole cover is not circular, not square. But I think it's probably something like it's the smallest amount of material for the biggest hole that you can squeeze a body through. It's probably something like that.
A square manhole cover will rock. Actually, a lot of square manhole covers are actually 2 triangles, so they don't rock.
That's true, they are. There you go, you learn something new every day, don't you? Any other questions?
Perhaps last question. Okay, I think.
Okay, if we're done, all I can say, guys, is if you're in the interview cycle, good luck, do your prep. And if you do the prep, if you've got those starbs ready, if you do the stuff we talked about tonight, you're just going to take yourself from being in the pack to being one of the few that really get serious consideration, because you'll just come over much more polished, much more in control, much more the sort of person that an employer will want.
Okay, so
thank you, that was great.
Yeah, thank you very
really
much.
helpful.
before you go away, let me also do a few thank yous. Actually, firstly, Keith, as you see, who's been with us, and he has put a lot of effort, background before organizing this event, and personally went through the list and allocated you places from 30 to 100. So thank you, Keith, and also IET support staff who was there at the beginning to organize this event. And of course, finally, Eddie, I always enjoyed, loved listening to your speeches. So thank you very much. Probably you don't know, it's my whole family is waiting to cut the cake. It's my birthday, but I couldn't.
Oh,
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
happy birthday, Abaya.
Thank you, but
You don't look 65.
Well, no. And guess what? This is after talking to Keith last time. This is what I have now. So really recommend reading, and thank you very much, Keith. You've been fantastic. I enjoyed very much. I'm sure everybody enjoyed. So all of you, please send us comments, and that
please.
really help us. Stay tuned. We have lots of other events coming on as well. And finally, virtually, to thank Keith and wish you a very good night. So applause.
Oh yes, very good. Thank you, Abaya. Can I just say, folks, you'll get a survey from the IET. This was originally going to be a face-to-face, and it is different delivering by Zoom. So if you've got any feedback for us that will help us make it better, we'd love it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and have a good night.